We've discussed the European explorers who reconnected the Eastern and Western hemispheres in the 15 and 1600s. Columbus, Magellan, Balboa, and many others, and the riches and power they brought to their sponsors, the kings and queens who paid for their trips. Now, let's examine the challenges of empire. How do you manage a global economic empire? Today, it takes 19 hours to fly from Dallas to Manila with one stop. You can call or send an email instantaneously, but if you want to move people or goods, it takes some time and some planning. Imagine doing that in the 1600s, the 1800s. I'd like to talk about three things today. The first is the issue of managing a global empire in the 16 to 1800s. The second is one technique for doing that, the Manila Galleon. And the third, I'd like you to think about what challenges still remain today in an era of jet travel and cargo ships. I'd like to think specifically about the Iberian Empire. Iberia refers to both Spain and Portugal, the two occupants of the Iberian Peninsula. You can see on the map the territory these two controlled in 1600. It was a global empire. I'd like to focus on one technique the Spanish Empire used to control its holdings, the Manila Galleon, a ship that sailed between Acapulco and Manila, connecting these two parts of the Spanish Empire for 250 years, between 1565 and 1815. The ships were built in Manila, so let's say the voyage started there. The journey was perilous, with ships leaving in June or July, often sailing north of the 40th parallel, where the wind and currents were most favorable, then sailing down the west coast of North America to Acapulco. It typically took 6 months, but could take as little as 4 or as many as 8. Crowded together in the heat, with a poor diet, many travelers died of disease. The trip back was easier, taking only 3 to 4 months. The entire voyage, undertaken once a year, took approximately a year to connect two far-flung parts of empire. The Manila Galleon left Manila laden with silk, Chinese porcelain, Persian carpets, spices, some slaves, and gold, and returned with silver to buy more goods. Typically 3 million silver pesos. Profits were enormous. Silk sold for 10 times the Asian price when sold in Mexico. The crown took a cut of the profits, as did every middleman along the way. And with the king so far away, who was to know if a tax collector or customs officer took a bribe to turn a blind eye to some indiscretion? The risks were also enormous. One sailor described the journey as the longest and most dreadful of any in the world, enough to destroy a man of steel, much less one made of flesh and bone. In addition to dying on the ship, some ships were lost at sea or had to turn back due to bad weather. Some ships were attacked. Once other nations and sailors became aware of these floating treasure chests, they tried to steal the bounty. The galleons came to be armed, however, and only 4 were completely lost to piracy. 4 in 250 years is not bad, but it is enough to inspire others to attempt piracy. Why did the Manila Galleon end? The Spanish monopoly over the port of Manila ended, and the centers of global trade changed. The United States, China, Brazil, and India became more dominant. British naval power grew. The major locations and actors changed, but the challenges of managing a global empire remained. Distance, theft, adequate supervision. Can you think of others? Can you think of some that remain today?